By now, we hope that you've had a chance to review this flowchart. The flowchart represents Lake Orion Community Schools' revised multi-tiered system of support. This system is referred to as MTSS. Every school in Lake Orion will follow this same three-tiered system of support. We believe this consistency will increase access, opportunity, and efficiency, while also increasing student achievement. You'll notice that the system travels two ways. Begin at the start icon. You can follow this dark line and move through the yellow area toward the red and toward those three-tier supports. In this case, additional supports keep being added for the student. Other times, the dash line leads you backwards toward the green. This signifies the reduction in supports as student reaches the benchmark or the goal. The purpose of our system is to get every child the support that they need to be successful with our curriculum. Let's take a closer look at each tier, beginning with Tier 1. Now, in this tier, about 80% of students will have their needs met. All students will be provided with a high-quality differentiated instruction that uses grade-level materials. This will include things like temporary small groups, conferring, in-classroom accommodations, and at times, even some push-in support from an additional adult. Keep in mind that when a grade level all does the subject at the same time, this limits the opportunity for push-in support. For example, if all of the fourth grade does math from 3 to 350, only one classroom can get push-in math support. It's also in this green Tier 1 phase that all students are given screeners to predict who might need additional assistance. Some students may also be given some diagnostic testing in order to better determine their needs. Teachers meet in grade level teams to decide who will need Tier 2 support. Teachers and interventionists will also fill out learning response plans for students who will benefit from additional attention. When you're determining the Tier 2 caseload, it's important to remember that our goal is not to service more students. It's really to help those students who need it the most. Research suggests that academically healthy school districts should only be providing pull-out intervention services to about 15% of their students. Our goal is to honor that number and ensure that no more than 15% of students are eligible for pull-out intervention. If an interventionist supports 2 grade levels, the absolute maximum number of students that may be on his or her caseload is 20. Interventionists will use research-based programs with fidelity in a pull-out setting. They will also have flexibility in their schedules, allowing them to use research-based strategies in push-in settings. When working as a grade level, begin by looking at the students with the priority eligibility. If these students have other at-risk data, they should be the first to receive services. If your team hasn't reached 15% and you're able to look at those students with alternate eligibility, look again at other tests to determine if a need exists. Students who are proficient or green on the priority and alternate eligibility screeners are never eligible for pull-out support. Once a caseload is determined, it will be approved by the Student Services Coordinator. It's during Tier 1, specifically Data Week, when learning response plans are completed. These learning response plans eliminate the need for interventionists to keep logs, to complete progress reports on students. They also eliminate the need to complete separate reading plans. They minimize and, in some cases, eliminate the paperwork needed to take a child to another meeting. They're actionable and they can be used all year long. Let's begin with K3. Any child who scores in the red or the high risk category on our district reading screeners. Okay, so in kindergarten and first grade, that's early reading. In second and third grade, that's both A reading and CBM reading. Any child who scores in the red or high risk category on those must have a reading plan, even if those students also receive special education services. Any K3 student who is going to be on the interventionist caseload will also need a reading plan. One note, in the fall, the only kindergartners who will need a plan were those on red on early reading. When the students are added to the kindergarten caseload in November, additional learning plans will be filed. Now, for fourth and fifth grade, it's slightly different. The only students who need a plan are the students who will be in math intervention. For this first part of the plan, the Tier 1 section of the plan, the classroom teacher chooses a focus strand and a diagnostic assessment. Both of these options are pull-down menus. Then, the classroom teacher chooses a targeted skill, a strategy or some activities, and a progress monitoring tool that they'll use for their Tier 1 goal. Start with something simple. Perhaps phonics is the focus strand. Maybe vowel work is the targeted skill. And the strategy or activities might be decodable readers. The progress monitoring tool might be conferring notes. These are absolutely and intentionally not drop-down menus because we want teachers to pick things that they feel comfortable with, things that they think are doable. Avoid using FastBridge progress monitoring tools or specific programs that we typically use in intervention when you're thinking about this Tier 1 work. Now, the second part of the Tier 1 plan, also filled out by the classroom teacher, is the accommodations. You might choose to leave this blank, but if you choose to use it, the nice thing is that all of your information will be housed in one spot. You won't need to bring or pull multiple things. The 3 accommodations that you can pick from, those 3 columns, have the 15 most effective accommodations. And of course, there's an other option in case none of those meet your students' needs. Now, when you get to the Tier 2 portion of the plan, the interventionist will fill this part out. All of these columns are drop-down menus, and only district-approved options are available. You'll notice one more thing on the Tier 1 section of the plan. You'll notice a crisis response and identification staffing. This we refer to as a crisis plan. This is typically used when a child is added to a classroom and the screening window is already closed. It's possible that in this case, the child might be in need of urgent help. There are also some occasions when a crisis plan might be used for behavior. This emergency staffing typically only includes the principal, the teacher, and maybe one other person. Examples might be a gen ed social worker, a psychologist, or an interventionist. This plan serves as a temporary plan until either the child can be brought to a Tier 2 whole child meeting or until the next screening window. In addition to Tier 1, about 15% of our students will also need Tier 2 services. Once the students begin to participate in pull-out intervention, it'll be important for us to closely monitor the child's progress. We will not only consider whether they're making growth, but how much growth and whether that rate of improvement is closing their learning gap. Approximately every 3 or 4 weeks, interventionists will meet with the student services coordinator to review data on students. If a student is not making the desired growth, then the classroom teacher is contacted. There'll be some small changes in the plan, perhaps increasing the frequency or the number of times a week that the child meets with the intervention, maybe decreasing his or her group size, or adding a little bit of additional service. Whatever change is determined, the notification of this change is called a TAP collaboration. Typically, this is going to be an email communication. At this time, the interventionist will go back to the learning plan and update the plan with the necessary changes so that services can once again be implemented. If a child continually does not show progress, a whole child meeting is held. Whole Child is a building-based problem-solving team. These meetings take place before school and call on all staff to work together to come up with a plan for a student. Specifics on how whole child meetings will run at your building will be shared by your building principal. The whole child meeting will result in a database alternate plan. A teacher will not need to fill out any additional paperwork to bring a child to a whole child meeting. Downloaded data, learning plans, and progress monitoring graphs will all be shared in a digital storage file. This plan will often add additional services or alternate interventions for a child. Previous and future social and emotional support is also considered for students at whole child meetings. About 5% of students will need services beyond Tier 2, and these students will move on to Tier 3. Tier 3 begins with what's called a CARES meeting. This is a coordination of academic resources in education. The goal of a CARES team meeting is to determine the next course of action for a student. This team will use substitute coverage and meet during the school day. Again, each building will look slightly different, but one can expect that this team might include the current teacher, the LRC teacher, the gen ed and the special ed social worker, the school psychologist, the building principal, and a teacher from the next grade level. This team will decide if a special education evaluation, a 504, or a student success plan might be the best option for the student. If the team chooses to pursue a special ed evaluation and a child does not qualify for special education services, a student success plan may be written. A student success plan is a longer lasting plan. It'll exist from one screener window to the next, and it will provide continuous support services. This way, some students on these unique plans will not have services suspended during testing windows, etc. These plans will allow students to begin services where they left off the previous year. For example, at 4 times a week, twice a day. Additional information on these student success plans will be forthcoming. At this point, you surely have some questions. You might even feel a little bit uneasy about the details of this plan. But we want to assure you that we will be monitoring the system's implementation and adjust as needed. It's important for all of us to remember that the goal of this system is student success. It's our hope that by clearly defining our process and increasing the consistency across our district, we can provide better access, stronger support, and ultimately increase student achievement for all. If you leave this presentation with additional questions, you can contact Kate DeMio, the Student Services Coordinator, Julie Gutman, the Director of Special Education, or Carrie Anderson, the Director of Elementary Curriculum. Have a great afternoon.